And we're back. I'm Lisa Smith, your host for today, and this is Live from the Heartland. We're broadcasting live from the Heartland Cafe at the corner of Glenwood and Lunt. And you're always welcome to stop by because we always have the best guests. And my next guest is Eric Scholl. Louisiana keeps getting bad news. First Katrina a few years ago, now the British Petroleum oil spill. But Eric and Cyndi Moran have a different Louisiana story to tell. Their film, called It's in the Blood, is their documentary about Leo ABSHIRE. He's a Cajun musician in Louisiana, but no, whereabouts in Louisiana does Leo live?
Well, Leo, spoiler alert, Leo lived in Gaydon, Louisiana, which is west of Lafayette. And that area has been pretty hard hit also over the last few years. It missed Hurricane Katrina, but it was hit by Hurricane Rita. And where his family is from, is a little bit west of there. And that town that Holly Beach, that he had a club in and that sort of thing, was completely wiped off the map by Hurricane Rita. And there's nothing left, just pilings. And you heard almost nothing about that because the Katrina damage was so bad. So yeah, Louisiana is just
it's just getting it over, yeah.
Absolutely crazy. So.
Now, I have to ask, before we go on about Leo, he is a Cajun music fiddler. He makes fiddles, he plays them, he sings. And some of the music that we've been playing on the breaks here that's Leo ABSHIRE.
Exactly.
But you got to tell me, Eric, how did you find Leo, and to begin with, like what got you interested in making this film? Well,
I am a very bad fiddler, and my wife Cyndi Moran, the co-producer, has a family that goes back in Louisiana for generations. So we spent a lot of time down there. We're really into Louisiana music. We actually met Leo at a jam session. He had a famous Mardi Gras jam session every year, the evening of Mardi Gras, in a small town called Morse. And anybody was welcome to just come down and see him. And you'd go there, this little tiny restaurant, and there'd be all these incredibly high-level Cajun musicians, but completely unassuming. So he hosted it with his friend Eddie Lejeune, and they're both many generation Cajun musicians that come from long families that have been doing Cajun music forever. And you just go there, and he instantly, I asked if we could sit in, and he said, yeah. I talked to him for a long time, and then later on we met him again at University of Chicago in the folk festival, and just got a friendship with him, and ended up going down there and taping with him over a number of years.
How is he now? It says in the film that he worked on oil rigs, which I hate to make that connection right now. Because, oil rig people are not my favorite people, but you got to make a living. So
and that was the interesting thing about Cajun music in general down in Louisiana, and him in particular. The people who do it are world-class musicians who are famous, in many other places. Leo was much more famous in England than he was here. Most people have not heard of him here, and the thing is, most people who do it, you can't make a living doing it. So it would be as if somebody playing for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra also had to have a day job. They were that level of musicians, but they all worked in oil rigs or factories. D.L. Menard, who's in the film, is the Cajun Hank Williams. He's one of the most famous Cajun musicians, but he made his money with a chair factory. He had a chair factory on his property, and they all do something else. They consider this kind of a second thing that the musicianship is the second job for them, even though it's just phenomenal quality. And he never really considered himself a professional musician until after he retired. He was playing in Europe and England and Germany, but he never considered himself a professional musician.
So he was gigging in Europe?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he played all over the world. He was in D.L. Menard's band, and they played one of the opening events at the Olympics in Atlanta. Very cool. So world-class stuff. But yeah, it was the thing that he did on the side. And the fiddle making he also did on the side of that. So he was an incredibly busy guy.
He makes like solid body electric fiddles, right?
Yeah, he makes well, no, they're not solid body. They're standard acoustic fiddles.
Oh,
he
really?
was all about tradition. He never did. He was totally acoustic, and his fiddles are owned by lots of famous players. Doug Kershaw, who's also in the movie, plays a Leo ABSHIRE fiddle.
Wow.
And I got to play one once. And it was phenomenally responsive. I do.
You do?
I never did while I was filming with him because I was embarrassed. Yeah. But after he died, his cousin Ray said, "Hey, I've got a fiddle. You want to try it?" And it was unlike anything I've ever played. It was great.
Wow.
So
there's a patois, I guess, that Leo spoke with.
Yep.
Is it a patois? Is it a Creole dialect? I mean, what do you call that? I can't understand it.
Yeah, I mean, it is basically, everyone down there, he did not, in school, he mentions this in the film, they grew up speaking French until they got to elementary school. And then their teachers essentially said, you can't speak French on the playground. You can't speak French in school. There was a movement to just wipe out the French language in that part of Louisiana because they wanted to be homogenized. They wanted to be American. And it's really amazing that French and French music still exists at all down there. As Barry Anselay in the film says, he's an expert in Cajun culture. There's really no logical reason why French should continue down there, and yet it does. And basically, each generation has to make that decision to continue the French culture or not. And Leo is one of the people who was really good at continuing that French tradition and passing it on.
Well, so
very endangered.
So when you're saying there's an actual policy of eradicating French
Not anymore.
culture?
There was. This was in the the earlier part of the century, the 1940s, 50s, etc.
Okay, not now though.
And now they're doing exactly the opposite. They're bringing in teachers from France to teach them their own culture because the kids don't know it. And there's a big movement to teach it in the schools. The Cajun kids are learning it again, but it's definitely very much endangered, and particularly after all of these disasters because people are moving out, and when they move out, that doesn't pass on.
Well, because the traditions obviously depend on some kind of continuity in the community.
Absolutely.
And if you disrupt that, I mean, everybody goes everywhere else. So how many years did you, or how long, I don't know if it was years, how long were you filming and visiting?
Years.
And it was years.
Yeah.
How long?
It's funny because Cyndi and I started 3 films about 11 years ago.
I'm impressed.
Before our kids were born. They're sitting over there. But
I see that.
And we finished 2 out of 3 of them. So we've got one more that we're still working on. But we visited Leo, first in, the late 90s, and we went back a few times after that. We kept up the correspondence. But we were, we live here, they live there, so it was hard to do it. So we went down 3 or 4 times, spent, a good amount of time, stayed at their house. They cooked for us and everything. But yeah, it's hard to do a long distance film like that. So,
Well, so was this like a pet project? Is this something that you wanted to put out there just to preserve the culture?
Exactly. It's something that we've always had an interest in Cajun music and in fiddling in general, and it was just something that we saw as a way of bringing this culture to a wider audience, the wider world, and that's it's been really good in hopefully getting his name out, his legacy out, and passing it on to other people.
Well, I know when I was trying to find some music by him, I went to iTunes, I went to Amazon, I couldn't find anything.
Right. It's put out by small local companies. Some of it's put out by individual people. Louisiana is still one of the places that has small indigenous record companies and small indigenous record shops. You can go from town to town, and there's still a few companies that are recording and putting out music. In fact, when I was trying to get rights to some of the music, one of the record company owners said, "Yeah, sure, you can use it. By the way, would you like to buy my record label?" Because it's so hard to run something independent like that, and they're getting old. So that's another reason why this is an endangered culture.
They've been around for a while.
Yep.
But I would think that with the modern digital technology, it should be actually easier for people to have their own record labels.
Right. It is.
Actually,
it is definitely. But it's hard, it's easier to find an audience, but it's also easier for everything to be kind of leveled out. There's not necessarily as much interest in indigenous culture, and the culture changes. The more the music spreads, the more it gets mixed with rock and blues and country, and it's less the really traditional Cajun stuff. And that's the stuff that's being endangered. And that's what Leo played. His music was completely. I mean, you could have gone someplace 50 years ago and heard something that sounded like what Leo was playing at the end of his life.
Now, do people, I want to get back to the fact that, when this is going to be screened today.
Right.
It's today, right?
No, this is actually tomorrow at 4:15 at the Evanston Public Library. It's part of, the really great slate of stuff that's coming up at the film festival.
It's all good.
Yeah,
They really curated a very, very nice...
And that's what I love about this festival is it's very, very curated. They have a really, in some of the bigger festivals, it's just so much, and it's loaded down with really big name stuff. And with this, it was very carefully curated. They tried to pick stuff that went well. It's indie,
alternative,
exactly,
filmmaking.
Stuff you wouldn't necessarily see, like the Oscar shorts, which are available, but you can't necessarily see them readily in a theater.
Exactly.
And they're showing both, animated and drama, which is great.
I know, that's an amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
Just the last question before I go, because I'm going to have someone coming up here to talk
great.
about a slightly different topic. And that is, do people people are still playing this pure kind of Cajun music down there, and they're still dancing to it and partying to it, right?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. There are a number of places you can still go see it. Less than there used to be. There used to be a lot of dance halls, really old traditional dance halls. Some of those have closed, but there are still some of the bigger places where you can do it. Dancing is huge, and a lot of it has to do with the food. The food is so popular that the food naturally leads to the music, naturally leads to the dancing.
So it's all of a piece.
It's not going to go away, but it is definitely something that, I've heard the phrase, if you want to see it in its traditional form, get down there fast.